History has a narrative, a story we all know. The Renaissance bloomed in Italy. The scientific revolution ignited in Europe. The Age of Enlightenment brought reason, and with it, the mastery of a fundamental force, electricity. But what if that story is wrong? What if the spark of that discovery was struck not in the labs of Franklin or Volta, but in a forgotten kingdom, centuries earlier, by a king whose name was erased from time? This is the story of King Zimran, a ruler, a genius, a visionary, and a man the world was determined to forget. In the 15th century, Europe was slowly emerging from the Dark Ages. Life was defined by brute force and the flicker of flame. Light was fire. Communication was the speed of a horse. The great scientific minds were still centuries away. But far from the crowded cities and smoky castles, a different kind of kingdom thrived. In the fertile valleys of a land now lost to the maps, King Zimran ruled. His court was not a place of mere politics and pageantry, but a living academy. He was a king who saw himself not just as a ruler of land, but as a steward of knowledge. While European scholars debated ancient texts, Zimran's own scholars, his masters of principle, worked in hidden laboratories, experimenting with forces the world would not understand for hundreds of years. They weren't just chasing myths, they were building the future. Their quest was to understand a strange phenomenon, a power that could be drawn from the very air and metals, a power they called the silent fire. And then, the breakthrough. King Zimran's own invention was extraordinary. Using primitive batteries, clay jars filled with a special brine, alternating discs of copper and silver, he found a way to capture and store this silent fire. These early capacitors could hold a charge. He demonstrated it in his palace courtyard. With a twist of a wire, he produced a bright, sharp spark that dazzled his courtiers, a light that came from no flame. He ran wires through the stone corridors of his castle, connecting them to glass vessels that would glow with a faint, ethereal light, banishing the shadows without smoke or smell. This was more than a parlor trick. Zimran envisioned a world transformed, a network of these lights to illuminate the night, machines that could be powered from a distance, a new way of communicating instantly across his kingdom. But this knowledge was kept a closely guarded secret, not for selfish gain, but for protection. He knew that in the wrong hands, such power would be used for domination, not elevation. He feared that the world outside his borders was not yet ready for such a gift. And his fear was justified. Tragedy struck. A neighboring empire, vast and militaristic, grew jealous of Luminara's prosperity and whispered of its strange, ungodly powers. They invaded. The kingdom's defenses, built on ingenuity, were ultimately overwhelmed by sheer, brutal force. In the chaos of the final battle, the great library and the hidden laboratories were put to the torch. The jars, the wires, the scrolls containing the principles of the silent fire, all were smashed, melted, or burned to ashes. King Zimran himself vanished in the conflict. Some stories say he fell defending his citadel. Others whisper that he was taken captive and died in a distant mountain prison. But his fate was less important than the fate of his legacy. The knowledge of electricity, so advanced for its time, was extinguished. The empire systematically erased his name from monuments and records, ensuring their conquest would be total and his memory would be forgotten. Europe would eventually discover electricity hundreds of years later, building from the first fumbling experiments, never knowing they were merely reinventing what had been lost. Why is King Zimran not in our history books? Because history is, so often, written by the victors. The invading empire scrubbed his existence from the record, and later, European scholars, convinced of their own cultural and intellectual supremacy, dismissed the fragmented tales of lights without flame from foreign lands as mere fantasy or legend. Rare manuscripts that survived, hinting at these wonders, were catalogued as curiosities or works of fiction. But Zimran's story is a powerful reminder. A reminder that brilliance is not confined to the centers of power we recognize. That genius can bloom in the most unexpected places, only to be crushed by the boots of conquest or the arrogance of history. Imagine a world where his discoveries had spread. The course of human progress might have accelerated by centuries. Yet, even in obscurity, his legacy endures as a lesson that the pursuit of knowledge is a noble cause in itself, and that the full story of our past is far richer and far more mysterious than the pages of any textbook dare to tell. Remember King Zimran, the forgotten king who saw the light, centuries before the rest of the world emerged from the dark.